I will never forget the stunned expression on Melissa's face as she proposed opening our marriage. After 8 years together, my wife suddenly wanted to explore relationships with other people while keeping our marriage intact. I loved her deeply, so after weeks of pressure, reluctant discussions, and against my better judgment, I agreed. 3 months into our open marriage experiment, Melissa called me at work, bubbling with excitement. "Nathan, I have amazing news. I am pregnant. Justin and I are having a baby." Her voice trailed off when all she heard was silence. She never expected that by dinner time divorce papers would be sitting on our kitchen counter. Before I continue this journey of betrayal and self-discovery, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If you have ever had to stand firm on your values despite pressure from someone you loved, hit that like and subscribe button. The path I took might just help you find your own strength. Melissa and I met during our sophomore year at Cornell University. I was studying architecture while she pursued marketing and communications. We literally bumped into each other at the library one rainy October evening, both reaching for the same architecture reference book. She was researching for a marketing project on urban development, and I was working on a design assignment. That chance encounter led to coffee, which turned into dinner, which evolved into what I believed was a once-in-a-lifetime love. We dated throughout college, supporting each other through late-night study sessions, internships, and the stress of final projects. After graduation, we moved to Boston together, where I joined a promising architecture firm and she landed a position with a digital marketing agency. We married 2 years later in a beautiful ceremony at her parents' lakeside home in New Hampshire, surrounded by family and friends who celebrated what everyone called a perfect match. For the first 5 years of our marriage, we grew together in ways I treasured. We saved for a house in a charming suburb, renovated it together on weekends, and built a social circle of like-minded couples. Our careers flourished in parallel. I was becoming known for sustainable residential designs while Melissa climbed the corporate ladder, eventually becoming a marketing director. We discussed having children in our early 30s, agreeing to establish our careers first and enjoy some years of travel and freedom together. The first subtle shift in our relationship came when Melissa's company hired a new creative director who brought a distinctly progressive energy to their workplace. Ryan was openly polyamorous and often spoke about his primary partner Alice and their other relationships. Initially, Melissa would come home with stories about Ryan and Alice that we both found somewhat shocking and occasionally amusing. I noticed, however, that her tone gradually changed from surprise to curiosity and eventually admiration. "They seem so evolved," she said one evening after a company event, where she had spent considerable time talking with both Ryan and Alice. "The level of communication they have is incredible. They say jealousy comes from insecurity, and truly confident relationships can thrive with more openness." I nodded politely, but felt a knot forming in my stomach. My parents had been married for 40 years, and I was raised with traditional values about commitment and family. While I considered myself open-minded, the concept of sharing my wife with others felt fundamentally wrong to me. As months passed, Melissa began spending more time with her new work friends. She joined them for after-work drinks several times a week, and attended weekend gatherings I was often too busy to join due to architectural deadlines. When she did invite me, I felt distinctly out of place among people discussing relationship anarchy and the limitations of monogamy, as though they were talking about the weather. Our previously aligned life plans started shifting without clear discussion. When I mentioned the timeline we had set for starting our family, Melissa became evasive. "I am just not sure that is what I want anymore," she said. "At least not right now. I feel like I am just discovering myself in new ways." Other changes became impossible to ignore. Melissa revamped her wardrobe with bolder, more provocative styles. She began guarding her phone, turning it face down when I entered the room, and changing her password. Nights out with friends from work grew later, and more than once she returned home with the scent of unfamiliar cologne. When I expressed concern, she accused me of being controlling and old-fashioned. The conversation that changed everything happened on our 8th wedding anniversary. I had made reservations at the upscale restaurant where we had celebrated our first year of marriage. Melissa seemed distracted throughout dinner, and as we waited for dessert, she reached for my hand across the table. "Nathan, I have been doing a lot of thinking about us, about the nature of relationships in general," she began. "Have you ever considered that monogamy might be an outdated concept? That humans are not naturally designed to be with just one person for their entire lives?" My anniversary dessert turned bitter in my mouth, as Melissa launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech about how opening our marriage could strengthen our bond, bring new energy into our relationship, and allow us both to grow as individuals. She presented it initially as a philosophical discussion, but I recognized the intent behind her words. "No," I said firmly. "I have never considered that. When we married, we promised fidelity to each other. That means something fundamental to me." This led to our first major argument as a married couple. Melissa accused me of being close-minded, insecure, and controlling. I felt blindsided and betrayed that she would even suggest such a radical departure from the life we had planned together. That night she slept in the guest room, and something irreplaceable between us began to crack. Over the next several weeks, Melissa launched what I can only describe as a campaign to change my mind. She sent articles about the outdated constraints of traditional marriage podcasts, featuring couples who had successfully opened their relationships in books with titles like The Ethical Slut and Opening Up. Every conversation somehow circled back to how limiting monogamy was, and how much happier we could be with more freedom to explore. Friends we had known for years suddenly revealed they had experimented with open relationships. I later discovered Melissa had specifically sought out their perspectives to help convince me. The pressure became relentless. She scheduled a session with a therapist who specialized in alternative relationship structures and who seemed to have been briefed in advance to advocate for Melissa's position. Finally, after nearly 2 months of this persistent erosion of my resolve, Melissa delivered her ultimatum during a tense dinner at home. "Nathan, I love you, but I need more than this. Either we try opening our marriage, or I am not sure I can stay happy long term. This is something I need to explore with or without your blessing." The implication was clear. If I continued to resist, our marriage might end. Exhausted from fighting and terrified of losing the woman I loved, I reluctantly agreed with specific conditions. Complete honesty, regular check-ins, no emotional attachments, no mutual friends or colleagues, always using protection, and no overnight stays. Most importantly, if either of us became uncomfortable, we would close the relationship immediately and seek counseling. Melissa enthusiastically agreed to all terms, her face lighting up with a joy I had not seen directed at me in months. She thanked me repeatedly for being evolved enough to try this experiment, promising it would make our marriage stronger. That same night, she created dating profiles on several apps, her excitement palpable and painful to witness. My own attempts at dating felt forced and uncomfortable. I had coffee with a woman from a dating app who seemed lovely, but I could not stop thinking about how wrong it felt to be there. A second date with another woman ended early, when she sensed my discomfort and directly asked if I was truly interested in an open relationship. When I honestly answered no, she kindly suggested I reconsider my arrangement. Meanwhile, Melissa found immediate success. Within days, she was texting constantly with multiple prospects. Within weeks, she had regular dates scheduled, particularly with Justin, a financial analyst from her company whom I now realized had been in the picture long before our marriage was officially opened. When I questioned this, she dismissed my concerns, saying they had only been friends before but had always felt a connection. I began seeing a therapist on my own, trying to process the growing depression and anxiety I felt watching my marriage transform into something unrecognizable. The therapist gently helped me realize I had been manipulated into a situation fundamentally at odds with my values. As the weeks passed, Melissa broke virtually every rule we had established. She stayed out overnight, claiming it was too late to drive home safely. She brought Justin to our house while I was on a business trip, which I discovered from a neighbor who expressed concern. She stopped using our shared calendar to note her dates, making it impossible to know her schedule. When confronted, she would become defensive, accusing me of trying to control her authentic expression of love. 3 months into our open marriage, I returned home early from work with a migraine to find evidence that Melissa and Justin had been in our bed that afternoon. When I texted her about it, she responded that we should talk about adjusting some of our outdated boundaries. That evening, Melissa suggested meeting at Giovanni's, our favorite Italian restaurant, saying she had exciting news to share. As we settled into our usual corner table, she could barely contain herself. "Nathan, something amazing has happened," she beamed, reaching for my hands across the table. "I am pregnant. Justin and I are having a baby." She continued talking excitedly about how this unexpected blessing could work for all of us. Justin would be involved as much as he wanted to be, but she saw us raising the child together in our home. She had already been researching how other polyamorous families structured co-parenting and had joined several online support groups. Throughout her monologue, I remained silent, a strange calm settling over me as everything became crystal clear. When she finally paused for my reaction, I simply asked, "Is this what you truly want?" "Of course," she exclaimed. "It is unexpected, but I think this could be beautiful for all of us." I nodded, excused myself to use the restroom, and called a divorce attorney from the privacy of a bathroom stall, scheduling an appointment for the following morning. When I returned to the table, I maintained my composure through the remainder of dinner. Melissa was too caught up in her own excitement to notice my detachment. The next day, while she was at work, I provided my attorney with all necessary documentation. By Saturday morning, Melissa was served divorce papers while having brunch with Justin. Her phone calls and messages afterward ranged from disbelief to rage to tearful pleas. She genuinely could not comprehend why her pregnancy by another man would be grounds for ending our marriage. Melissa's initial shock quickly turned to desperate attempts to save our marriage. She showed up at our house in tears, promising to end things with Justin and all other partners. She scheduled appointments with 3 different marriage counselors, begging me to attend. When I declined, she enlisted her parents, my parents, and our mutual friends to call and convince me to reconsider. To my surprise, many of our friends supported my decision. Several confided that they had been uncomfortable with Melissa's behavior for months but had not wanted to interfere. My parents, who had always been polite but somewhat reserved with Melissa, admitted they had concerns about her commitment to our marriage long before the open relationship proposal. "We saw how she looked at other men, even at your wedding reception," my mother confessed during a supportive dinner at their home. "We prayed we were wrong, but we always feared she would not honor her vows." The divorce process itself was complex and painful. Our lives had become deeply intertwined over 8 years, from finances to friendships to household items with sentimental value. The house we had lovingly renovated had to be sold, with proceeds divided according to our prenuptial agreement. Each room I cleared brought memories that now felt tainted by betrayal. I found a modern 1-bedroom apartment across town, furnished it minimally, and focused on creating a clean, uncluttered space that held no reminders of my past life. The stark simplicity became a physical representation of my desire to start fresh, unburdened by complicated arrangements or emotional manipulations. My architectural work became a sanctuary. I poured myself into designs with renewed focus and creativity, finding that the emotional turmoil somehow translated into more innovative and daring concepts. 6 months after moving out, I submitted a design to a prestigious sustainable housing competition and won first place, bringing new clients and recognition to my firm. Therapy continued to be essential for my recovery. My therapist helped me understand that wanting monogamy was not a character flaw or sign of insecurity. I gradually stopped apologizing for my traditional values and became more confident articulating what I needed in a relationship. Throughout the divorce proceedings, Melissa's pregnancy progressed. She alternated between trying to use the pregnancy to reconcile with me and threatening that I would regret not being part of her child's life. Justin, meanwhile, became increasingly distant as the reality of impending fatherhood set in. According to mutual friends, he had begun describing himself as a sperm donor, not a father, and making plans to relocate to the West Coast before the birth. 9 months after our separation, with our divorce finalized for 3 months, I cautiously began dating again. I was transparent about my experience, screening carefully for women who valued monogamy without apology. Several short relationships helped me rebuild trust and remember what genuine connection felt like. Then I met Claire, a pediatric cardiologist who had her own story of betrayal. Her ex-husband had carried on multiple affairs throughout their 5-year marriage before leaving her for his assistant. Despite this, Claire had maintained her belief in commitment and partnership, focusing on healing rather than becoming cynical. Our relationship developed slowly and deliberately. We discussed expectations, explicitly valued honest communication over conflict avoidance, and gradually built a foundation of trust that felt entirely different from what I had experienced with Melissa. Claire's direct nature was refreshing. There were no hidden agendas or manipulative tactics, just straightforward expressions of needs and boundaries. As our relationship strengthened, news occasionally reached me about Melissa. She had given birth to a son, and as predicted, Justin had moved to Seattle shortly before the delivery. He provided minimal financial support and had visited only once. Melissa had moved in with her parents, unable to afford a place on her own while covering childcare costs. She had reached out to several mutual friends, describing herself as a victim of abandonment by both Justin and me. 18 months after meeting Claire, I proposed during a weekend trip to Maine. As we planned our small, intimate wedding, I reflected on how different this relationship felt. With Claire, I never doubted where I stood or worried that my values were being undermined. We had compatible visions for our future, discussed openly, and negotiated with mutual respect. The relief of being in a relationship that added peace to my life, rather than constant tension, was immeasurable. 3 years after finalizing my divorce from Melissa, my life had transformed completely. Claire and I had been married for a year, and were expecting our first child, a daughter. My architectural practice had grown into a partnership specializing in environmentally sustainable family homes. We had purchased a craftsman-style house with a large yard in a family-friendly neighborhood, the kind of place where we could envision raising children and hosting neighborhood gatherings. One Saturday morning, while shopping at a farmer's market near our home, I heard a familiar voice call my name. Turning around, I saw Melissa pushing a stroller with a toddler boy, who had her eyes and curly hair. She looked tired, the confident glow she had once carried, now dimmed by the realities of single parenthood. "Nathan, wow, it has been so long," she said, her voice carrying forced brightness. "How have you been?" We exchanged awkward pleasantries as Claire tactfully moved to examine produce at a nearby stand, giving us space to talk. Melissa quickly filled the silence with updates. She was still at the same company but had been passed over for promotions twice. Justin had moved permanently to Seattle and rarely contacted them. Her parents were helping with childcare, but the arrangement was strained. Dating as a single mother was proving nearly impossible. As her rapid monologue continued, I noticed her eyes taking in my wedding ring, my relaxed posture, the subtle signs of contentment that apparently contrasted with her own situation. When Claire returned to my side and I introduced her as my wife, mentioning we were expecting a child, something shifted in Melissa's expression. "You know," she said quietly, "I think about us a lot, about how things ended. I understand now why you could not accept the arrangement I wanted." She glanced down at her son, who was happily playing with a toy in his stroller. "You were right all along about what makes a family work. I just could not see it then." The words were an obvious opening, a suggestion that perhaps now, with her vision cleared by experience, we might reconsider the past. There was a time such an overture would have thrown me into emotional turmoil. Now I felt only a gentle compassion mixed with absolute certainty about my current path. "I am glad you are finding clarity that brings you peace," I replied sincerely. "That journey has been important for me too." I placed my arm around Claire, whose presence beside me felt like the physical embodiment of the life lessons I had learned. "I wish only the best for you and your son." Melissa seemed to search my face for any sign of regret or lingering attachment, finding none. With a small nod of acceptance, she exchanged a few kind words with Claire about her pregnancy, before continuing on her way, the brief intersection of our lives complete. As Claire and I walked home, bags full of fresh produce for the week ahead, I reflected on the profound understanding I had gained through the painful dissolution of my first marriage. The pressure to compromise on fundamental values, to accept arrangements that violate personal boundaries, often comes disguised as progressiveness or evolution. Standing firm against such pressure is not close-mindedness, but self-respect. Compatibility in core values is not negotiable in relationships that last. The right partner enhances your life without requiring you to become someone else. With Claire, I had found a relationship built on mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine acceptance. The peace this brought was worth every difficult moment of the journey that led me here. In our home that evening, as Claire and I prepared dinner together, laughing over simple domestic moments, I felt gratitude for the painful clarity my past had given me. Sometimes the most significant growth comes through our greatest challenges. The lesson had been costly, but invaluable. Authenticity to oneself is the only foundation on which lasting happiness can be built. Have you ever had to stand firm on your values, despite pressure from someone you loved? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story of finding strength and authentic happiness resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience. Share this video with someone who might need encouragement to trust their own values. Thank you for joining me today, and remember that sometimes saying no to someone else's vision is saying yes to your own path forward.